Hey everyone, so this last section that we're going to be doing is going to be on EPDs. Basically their transmitting ability and genetic predictions and how we can use them. And so I really hope that this can be applicable if you guys are going to be using EPDs in the future. I know that a lot of you might have seen EPDs or know what they mean. We're going to take back up a little and just kind of talk about a little bit of things. So our quantitatively inherited characteristics, these are basically characteristics you can quantify. You can count them, you can score, whatever. So it's going to be weight, frame score, height, things like that. So our quantitatively inherited characteristics are the ones that we're talking about when we refer to EPDs. It's things that we can actually get data on. Qualitative characters would be, so something that's like not really scores, so qualitative would be like hair color or something like that. And while we do have genetic things that we have talked about, like hair color, predicting what we can expect the color to be in hogs or something like that, EPDs are specifically talking about those characteristics that we can count. So some of the differences between animals for quantitatively inherited characteristics are due to a couple different things. Differences in genotype at many different loci and environmental influences. We haven't got into it a whole bunch in my sections, but it's really important to understand that there's a huge genotype and environment interaction. One thing that's really challenging for people and scientists to figure out is that a lot of traits, so something like weight or something like that, are found at a lot of different loci. So in addition to having to figure out where they're found, they also have to take account for environmental influences. So that's something really important to always remember too. You can go out and pick the best animal on paper and things like that, but depending on your environment, which also includes things like management style, stuff like that, it really depends on how that animal actually will perform. So our transmitting ability, this is really important because it's the measure of a genotype for these quantitative characteristics. So it's basically, what's the transmitting ability? It's the ability for an animal to transmit whatever this characteristic is to its progeny. So the average amount of a very large number of the animal's progeny would differ basically from the progeny of an animal whose transmitting ability is 0 for that trait. So when they're calculating all these EPDs, it's always on that comparison. This is the comparison that they are above average compared to an animal that would be 0 for that trait. So EPDs are just estimates of this transmitting ability. It gives the producers a place to start when they're evaluating and looking for animals. So EPDs. So EPD stands for expected progeny differences. So this is really valuable. They are tools for producers to use when they're evaluating animals and their genetic potential for various traits. So it's a prediction on how future progeny of each animal is expected to perform. It's really important to remember too, because EPDs for an animal are talking about what we can expect out of their progeny. So why it's a number assigned to them as a specific animal, we're actually saying, so how are their progeny going to perform in birth weight or weaning weight, okay? So we express this in units of measure for the trait. It's going to be plus or minus depending on the trait. So just remember that you can have a negative in some of these, and you also will have positives. There's just a couple that will go negative, but that's also important to remember. So for calculating EPDs, we use a variety of things. So we have our performance of our parents, performance of any kind of half siblings or full siblings as well. Individuals' own performance, so they basically take into account, the actual birth weight, actual weaning weight, things like that. Performance of progeny and performance of grand progeny. So as an animal ages and they basically have more data to be input into these calculations, their EPDs will probably change. They will change as an animal gets older. So that's also important to understand. Breed associations run these EPD changes quite often as they're adding in different progeny or things like that. And so we will see changes for that. Each breed association out there has different formulas, and I will talk about that in a little bit. But they have different formulas to calculate their EPDs. They use different bases. So this is why we see differences between breeds, and we'll talk about how you would approach that. So when we're breaking them down a little bit, we have our EPDs for direct effects. So this animal's EPD for a particular trait is the average amount that its progeny would be expected based on what information we have to differ from the progeny of an animal whose EPD is 0 for that character. And then EPD for maternal traits is basically the same thing, but we're talking about its daughter's progeny instead. So we just always need to remember that an EPD of an animal is basically compared to an animal of, a different animal that would be 0 at that character. It's always kind of a comparison there. While EPDs themselves are really important, also accuracy is really, really important. This is a reliability that can be placed on the EPD. So we're going to see it range from 0 to 1, and the closer it gets to 1, so the higher it is, the more reliable it is that's its actual transmitting ability. The accuracy is going to be impacted by number of progeny and different ancestral records. So basically, the more information we have, the higher the accuracy is. Okay, so our PCVs, the possible change values, we also can call them standard errors. This ties into accuracy. So we use the accuracy to get our possible change values, okay? And we'll show that in a second. This is basically just a measure of precision of an EPD that defines an interval where there's basically a 68% probability that the animal's true transmitting ability is between 1 standard error above or below the EPD. So we'll talk about that in a second. But accuracy and PCVs they play with each other. So just like on our previous homeworks, we had you do standard error for a couple of them. It's the same kind of thing, okay? So we'll be looking at the EPDs, basically seeing how accurate and what we can expect their true transmitting ability to be. So just an example here, if we're comparing 2 bulls, so we have bull A and bull B and the differences here, and down below we have bull A has a 60-pound weaning weight, and bull B has a 73-pound birth weight, and I just put their basically kind of on a chart. So our bell curve here, I combine them together. We just kind of show, if for bull A it's 60, bull B it's 73, we would kind of compare them, and so there's a 13-pound difference. So if these 2 bulls were in the same breed, were bred to similar cows under the same exact management, we would actually expect bull B's calves to be about 13 pounds heavier on average than bull A's. We'll get into that a little bit more in a little bit. So I use the Angus Association, so all this information comes from the Angus Association's website. So we're just going to talk about the individual breed EPDs, but we're just going to talk about Angus, and I'll talk about a few other breed associations. So if you want more information, that's where you can find that. And it's always important to know that if you don't know something about an EPD, go to that association's website and you can find more information on it, which will help you in evaluating. So first of all, we'll talk about production EPDs. I kind of break these down pretty simple. They have a longer explanation on the website, but calving ease of direct is simply just the number of unassisted births in a sire's progeny, okay? So the higher value, the better. So basically that's going to indicate greater calving ease in first calf heifers, and so that's obviously really important. If we have a higher percentage of unassisted births, that's better. So birth weight EPD, the lower is better, especially for heifers. When you're looking at the birth weight EPD, it really depends on what you're looking for. So if you're looking for a bull to specifically put with heifers, you're going to look at this calving ease direct as well, but you're going to look at birth weight as well. It's important for that to be lower so you're not having to assist with those births. But, if you're breeding to cows and stuff, you might allow a little bit higher, but still you're going to want to pay attention to those. So for weaning weight EPD, higher is obviously better. This is expressed in pounds, basically a predictor for an animal's ability to transmit weaning growth. Yearling weight EPD, same kind of thing, higher is better. We refer to weaning weight and yearling weight. They're like, when we say they're higher performing, we are referring to these EPDs. If you're a producer, specifically focusing on selling their animals at weaning, that's going to be something that's really important to you. If you're a producer that's focusing on, selling them at yearling, things like that, these are really good. Those performance EPDs are really important to focus on. So, Angus Association has this residual average daily gain. So higher is better, right? So it's expressed as pounds per day. So it's basically a predictor for a sire's genetic ability for post-weaning growth. So basically, the more they're gaining per day, the better. So that's why you want that higher. For dry matter intake, this is something that kind of has become popular in the last, 10, 15 years. It's expressed in pounds per day. What we're saying is that they're not we kind of want these two to go together, as in we want the daily gain to be high and we want that dry matter intake to be lower, because what that's saying is that they're intaking less while still gaining more. Now, if it's like it's a low number for dry matter intake and the residual average daily gain is still not all that great, there's still some issue there, but you kind of want a big spread between those. Our yearling height is expressed in inches. The desired value really depends on operation. So if you're looking to add, some inches or something, or if you're looking to take away, you're going to look for a lot higher or lower accordingly. Some will also talk about frame score, same kind of thing as far as height goes, but this is kind of how Angus Association does it. So our scrotal circumference EPD, so this is expressed in centimeters. We want higher is better on this, okay? So scrotal circumference is something that some people might forget, but it's actually really important because scrotal circumference for bulls actually directly correlates to the fertility in his offspring. So we want bigger there. So for docility, this is kind of a whole bunch of complicated things that go into it. I'm pretty sure the first breed to start with docility was Limousine. Now a lot of other breeds are using this. Higher value indicates a more favorable temperament. So if you're looking to improve docility in your herd, you're really going to look for a higher value here. Now, if you're not really too concerned about your docility, you're not really going to pay too much attention to this. It's probably not going to negatively affect, unless you just constantly choose really low docility, then you might see an effect. So our maternal EPDs, our heifer pregnancy, and just as a note, all in the percent, the parentheses there I put after each one, that's basically if you're looking at EPDs all together, they basically minimize it so it's easier to know, but just so you know, so if you're looking at EPDs, HP would mean heifer pregnancy. Anyways, this heifer pregnancy is a selection tool to increase the probability or chance of a sire's daughter becoming pregnant at first calf heifers. So it's a good one to look at if you're looking for a bull that is breeding just first calf heifers. It's going to help you say, okay, this is the probability that all of his heifers are going to become pregnant as, in their first breeding. So we want a higher number there. For Cavigny's maternal, this expresses a difference in percentage of unassisted births. So pretty similar to Cavigny's direct, but it's also going to talk about a sire's daughters will calve as first heifers. Higher is better here. So for maternal milk, this is another common one through all breeds. It's a predictor of genetic merit for milking and for also a little bit for mothering. We know that the milking ability of a cow is going to contribute to an animal's their weaning weight, so this is something that's important. But we do see desired values here depending on operations. We know that people in really big pastures and stuff and really wide open, they're having to travel a long way and they're having to put a lot of their maintenance energy into, just simple maintenance. Too high of a milk is going to be kind of an issue there because they're not going to be able to maintain as well. So we kind of look for an average milk in those bigger operations, while something in a smaller area where they're, more confined with more available feed sources, we wouldn't mind if it was a little higher. So for mature weight, it's going to be expressed in pounds. So it's a predictor of the difference in mature weight of the sire's daughters. Sorry, this says or, but of sire's daughter. The desired value also depends on operation. So it really depends on if you're wanting to increase your mature weight or to, make it smaller. Same goes for mature height. That's expressed in inches. Predictor of the mature height of sire's daughter also depends on the operation. Cow energy value is expressed in dollars EN. This is basically dollar savings per cow per year. We want a higher number here, of course, because we're looking at dollars you're saving. They do use different components to put into this. This is actually an index we'll talk about in a few minutes. It includes lactation energy requirements and energy costs associated with different mature cow sizes. But basically, anytime you can see a higher savings, that's always good. So the carcass EPDs, these are really important. There's some traits that we talked about before that are going to be, we're not really getting into heritability. But when it comes to carcass traits, the nice things about looking at these is that heritability for carcass traits is really high. And so we definitely like to look at these, and you can make some really good changes if you're really focusing on some of these. So carcass weight expressed in pounds, higher is better, obviously, heavier carcass weights at time of slaughter. Marbling EPD, it's expressed as a fraction of the difference in USDA marbling score, so we want higher is better. Fun note on marbling EPD. So years ago in the Gelbvieh breed, Bull was a really popular bull because he won a bunch of shows. He had a bunch of daughters that were really good phenotypically, but he had a terrible marbling score. But still everybody used him, and our breed as a whole saw a huge drop in marbling. So that for the past 10 to 15 years, we've really been focusing on selecting higher marbling animals so we can increase that, obviously, because to focus on our endpoint. So, just an example there. Ribeye area is expressed in square inches. Higher is better, obviously, bigger ribeye. Fat thickness expressed in inches as well. This is a predictor of the differences in external fat thickness at the 12th rib, because we know that the carcasses are going to be cut between the 12th and 13th, so that's where the fat is measured. The desired value really depends on the operation and kind of what their goals are. Are they selling their animals on a grid, and then they want to make sure that they're getting leaner so we can have higher yield grades, or vice versa. So it really depends on their goals. So the Angus Association also has recently come out with these foot score EPDs. They've seen a lot of pushback from feedlots and different places, maybe feeding out bulls and stuff with some issues with actual feet. And so what we're saying is like the toes are being too spread, and then their foot angle from their pastern down wasn't ideal. And so we kind of saw some feet issue. There's some cracking, stuff like that. So they're trying to develop this tool to really address that issue. So claw set EPDs are expressed in units of the claw set score. Lower is better. So ideal claw set means that the toes are symmetrical, they're even, they're not too far apart, things like that. The foot angle EPD is expressed in units of foot angle score. Lower is better as well here. The ideal angle is a 45-degree angle at the pastern joint, so basically the pastern down. We want a good angle. So this is a way to use an EPD to really, for a phenotypic outcome, hopefully improving some of the issues they've seen in the past. So after that, we have our EPDs. We have indexes. So a lot of times these indexes are usually expressed with the dollar signs in front of them. These are really handy because it's an economic selection tool that allows basically, these indexes will take numerous different traits and they put them all together for a specific breeding objective. It's an estimate of how future progeny will will perform in the future, but it's nice because it kind of lumps a bunch into one. So here's some indexes that the Angus Association use. Maternal wean calf value expressed in dollars per head. So the great things about all these is that they're telling you it's basically dollars per head or whatever. And so this is where you're going to look and see if you're going to increase ultimate profitability. So maternal wean calf value is assuming individuals retain replacement females and then sell cull females and all male progeny. We want higher here. You can see the traits that they use to calculate into this one. Wean calf value, also dollars in head. The objective is basically looking at producers that would be retaining 20% of the female progeny as replacements, selling the rest, and then also selling all male progeny, and these are the traits that you use to calculate that. Feedlot value, also expressed in dollars per head. So this is basically assuming producers retain ownership of cattle through the feedlot phase and then sell them. This is a nice one. It's basically saying like how many dollars per head will you get when your cattle leave the feedlot. Grid value, expressed in dollars per carcass. This is assuming producers will market cattle on an above industry average carcass grid. So if you don't know what grids are, basically these are programs out there that reward producers for different areas. So there's all kinds of different grids that you can sell on. They might be focusing on, high marbling, high yield grade, whatever. But the producers basically get, added value because of their ability to rank high on this grid. And so this is saying, how much you can actually make. And so it takes those traits into account. And then beef value, also expressed as dollars per carcass. The objective assumes commercial producers wean all male and female progeny, retain them through a feedlot, and then they market them all on a carcass grid as well. And so those are the traits that they take into account there. So these value indexes are really awesome for producers if they're really kind of looking for, instead of looking at individual EPDs, they can take into account kind of everything that they're sort of looking for and look at one number. So there's some other associations that have other EPDs in addition to the ones, quite a few of the ones that we talked about. They might not all have all of those, but they do have, quite a few of them. So here's some interesting ones. Maintenance energy is one from Red Angus, I believe. It predicts differences in daughter's maintenance energy requirements. Lower is better. Basically, if she requires less to maintain her average weight, right, she's going to be better. For yield grade, this is pretty similar. We talk about like ribeye area and fat thickness because those play into yield grade, but it just lumps them into one. We want a lower yield grade if that's what you're looking for as a production unit. All-purpose index is basically dollars per cow exposed. So how much are you going to be increasing there? Stayability is a really awesome one that actually numerous breed associations have. It's basically a prediction of the percent of daughters that will remain in the cow herd at 6 years of age. Higher is better there. This is a really great one. I think 3 or 4 other associations, if not more, use this, and a lot of people like to look at it because we obviously want our cows to remain in our cow herd for a long time while hopefully producing a calf each year. Total maternal index. This a lot of places use. It combines growth and milk information, and if someone doesn't use it, you just can do it yourself because it's the milk EPD plus half of the wean weight EPD, and higher is better. Dollars cow, that's the genetic value in dollars of profit of an animal when they retain them as replacement females. And this is really nice if you're looking to, keep a lot of your females in your herd. This is actually saying how much profit that those animals are going to get. Higher is better. Efficiency product profit index aids producers to select feed efficient cattle. So it's similar to, I think, dollars feed that we saw before, but just kind of calculated differently. Higher is better. Feeder profit index aids producers in selecting sires whose progeny perform well in fetal on a grid. Higher is better. So similar to some ones that we've seen before, but this is just the, this association specific one. Terminal sire index, dollars per terminal progeny. Higher is better. So, we talked about other breeds, and it's important to understand that when you're comparing EPDs between breeds, that there is some adjustments. And so, the Meat Animal Research Center has actually come out with this a crossbreed EPD basically comparison. One of the disadvantages here is Angus is used as like the base. So say you have Limousine or whatever, you're basically going to have to kind of convert yours down to the Angus if you want to, depending on what you kind of compare to. You have to basically take these and convert them so you can put them on the same wavelength. But this kind of just shows, and it really has nothing to do with like the breeds compared, to Angus or whatever, not all together as a whole, but really it has to do with the fact that every single breed has different calculations. And so to be able to really compare, we want to go in and we want to say, okay, so if I want to compare a Hereford to a Red Angus, I'm going to have to make adjustments to get them on the same playing field as Angus, and then we can go in and adjust and compare. I'm not going to go into this a crazy bit, mainly because it's just something that you guys can have a tool, but just remember that when you're comparing different breeds and their EPDs, you have to adjust them before you can actually accurately compare the two. So I talked a bit at the very beginning about accuracies and possible change values, and so now we're just going to show you what that means. So here we have our accuracy column on the left. So if an animal has a certain accuracy, we can go in and we can see what their possible change value is depending on that accuracy. I'm going to show you in just a second on some bell curves what that actually means. But as you can see is as the accuracy increases, so as we know more, we can be more confident in that EPD and the accuracy increases. For like Cabanese Direct, we see these numbers go down. So basically their transmitting ability we're getting more confident in it. So this is just something you can find on any association's website, so you can really accurately compare EPDs and kind of know based on their accuracy, what their actual transmitting ability is. So these breed average percentile breakdowns are in here on their website. I'm just going to show you real quick. So if you go to the Angus Association's website, you can actually see, okay, so what are your top percentages here? So around 50, this would be basically a breed average. But then you go in, you can see, okay, so who's in the top 1%? So, if a bull, if they have that on their actual EPD sheet, you can actually say like, okay, this bull is in the top 1% for yearling weight or whatever. But it's nice because you can actually compare. You might know what the breed average is, but if you can go in, you can actually see where an animal lies as far as percentile breakdowns. Okay, so talking about transmitting ability, when we evaluate EPDs, it's really important to consider accuracy and understand what transmitting ability is. So we get the EPD, we say, okay, so what's the actual probability that this is their true transmitting ability? So it's basically saying, can we rely on this EPD or not, okay? So we go back to this bell curve. We know that when we're, talk about statistics, we have one standard error below and one standard error above. We know that we have a 68% chance of the true transmitting ability being between one above and one below. And then to go beyond, we know that we have a 95% probability that the true transmitting ability is between two standard errors above and below its EPD. So using that in mind, I'm just going to show you basically how you would compare. And I use my Apple Pencil for this, so I'm sorry it's kind of messy, but just comparing bulls. So you're going out and you're looking for a bull to breed to heifers, okay? So we have bull A right here. His birth weight is 1.0. You're thinking, okay, that might be okay. I could probably roll with that for heifers. Let's see. But then we look and we see his accuracy is 0.30, okay? So what I did is I took this accuracy and I used that possible change value chart right here, and I got his possible change value for 0.3. So I went to birth weight, so his possible change value is 1.88. So when I got that, I did the same for bull B. His birth weight is 1. His accuracy is a lot higher, okay, 0.80. Maybe he's an older bull, something like that. So his possible change value is 0.54, which I got from that chart. So if we set them up on this, right, we put their EPD right here, so that's like the median, right? So 1 and 1. But when we use bull A, his possible change value, we add 1.88 here, minus it on this side, do it again right here. Basically what we're saying is there's a 68% probability that his real transmitting ability for birth weight is between negative 0.88 and 0.288. Now when we look at bull B, we see that his higher accuracy lowers his PCV. So his probability, his transmitting ability is more likely, it's a 68% probability that it's between 0.46 and 0.154. You see the 95 right here too. But what that basically shows you is the more accurate an EPD, right, the more accurate, the narrower the transmitting ability, trueness really is. So the more confident we can be, because this is why you have people going out and saying, oh yeah, I got this bull, he's a low birth weight, he's going to do great on my heifers, and then all of a sudden all the birth weights are really high and they're not really truly transmitting to what he thought, and then he goes back in and he sees that the accuracy was like a 0.1, and so his true transmitting probability was, a huge range, and could be really high or could be really low. So that's why we see that issue. And just demonstrating it here again, so say we want to add growth, so we go into weaning weight, we have a bull with a 60 but a 0.15, and a bull with a 60 and a 0.75. So you can just see here, bull A with such a low probability, it's 68% probable that his true transmitting ability for weaning weight is between 46.7 and 73.3 pounds. That's a huge range and huge thing to kind of deal with and take a shot at. What if his true transmitting ability is actually like way over here, okay? Now for bull B, it's a 68% probability that his true transmitting ability for weaning weight is between 56.1 and 63.9. So we can be a lot more confident with him that his true transmitting ability is in here, right? So finally for marbling, I kind of showed you a big difference here, but we have our marbling EPDs. I got our PCVs from our accuracy. So if this bull is 0.47, he has a 68% probability of being between 0.29 and 0.65. So we got that from his accuracy. So then we look over here at bull B. His accuracy was a 0.9. he's 68% probable that his true transmitting ability is between 0.44 and 0.50. So we can be a lot more confident in that. So the whole point of this is that accuracies are really important, and then if you really want to go in and actually see and compare animals, you can go in, you can find their accuracy, find what that PCV is for that accuracy and that trait, and you can set this up and you can compare bulls side by side. So lastly, I just want to talk about genomic enhanced EPDs. So we actually use these in the exact same way as other EPDs. They basically just take genetic material and it enhances the accuracy. So it's a really valuable for younger animals to have less data that are used to calculate. So, you have a 2-year-old bull that might have previously had an accuracy of 0.10, right? Because he doesn't have any progeny, so all they're using for data are parents or something. But we use this data to calculate an accuracy, and it can be improved to 0.30 or something. So, for example, my family just sold a bull that I just looked at earlier today. He has like a 1.0 birth weight. He's a 2-year-old bull. He has 0 progeny. Okay, so the only data they have in are all their, his family members from, previous generations. His accuracy at birth weight is a 0.46, and so that's awesome. So we use genomic EPDs for that. So you might see a lot about that in today's. Just understand that it is not doing anything with the EPD itself. It's just improving the accuracy for the most part. This just really gives a producer a more reliable estimate of their transmitting ability. Like I showed you on the previous slides, the better the accuracy, the better we can know true transmitting ability. So, in conclusion, EPDs are a great tool for selection of animals. We know it's really important to understand what the individual EPDs are looking for, and what they're looking at and what you should be looking for. So a high or a low or whatever. Understanding accuracies are really important and really helps with selection. Also, it's really important to compare across breeds and adjust accordingly. I will say on this that EPDs are sometimes challenging and overwhelming because they have so many out there. It's important to really focus on those things that each individual needs in their operation. So what you're focusing on. It's also important to not single trait select. So not finding one trait and ignoring everything else, because then you see issues with those traits dropping and falling off. But also it's just important to kind of find things that you as an operation are looking at and focus on those kind of across the board and not getting too overwhelmed with all the EPDs out there. Before I end, I do just want to touch a little bit on DNA testing. So I'm on here on the Angus website. Basically all registrations out there now have some kind of DNA testing. So you can actually come in and there's different seed stock options. There's actually tests for commercial operations, but say we do this, so you can go in and you can test for all kinds of different things. So they use all these different markers. You can figure out fertility, feed efficiency, marbling, calving ease, different things like that. But also it tests against any of the genetic abnormalities that are out there. So that's something that's really important to understand if you're going to be a producer producing any kind of purebred or really anything, is understanding all the genetic testing availability out there for you, especially if you have a breed that does have quite a few genetic abnormalities. So that's all I have for you today. So thank you.